Welcome to the SBI podcast, offering CEOs, sales and marketing leaders ideas to make the number.
Welcome SBI video podcast viewers and audio podcast listeners. My name is Christina Dickmeyer, Director of Marketing at SBI, a sales and marketing consultant firm dedicated to helping CEOs and their leadership teams achieve their revenue growth goals. Joining me today are my co-hosts, Mike Drapeau, partner at SBI, and Kevin Avery, senior consultant at SBI. They will go toe-to-toe with some mighty fearsome opponents like conventional wisdom, bad strategy, and silo mentality. Today's show is titled, Strategy is a Four-Letter Word. Have you ever suffered through fruitless strategy attempts, either simplistic on one hand or hopelessly academic on the other? Do you think it's a waste of time? You're not alone. Do you think it suffices to have a strategy for your own function? This is also a common belief, but we beg to differ. We're going to make the case that strategy can be practical and that strategic alignment across your business is vital. Let the debate begin. Mike and Kevin, while I reach into our digital mailbag for our topic number one, what are your thoughts?
Well, Christina, my thoughts are all going to be centered on today, in this discussion at least, on our report, How to Make Your Number in 2016, which we recently released. And what it shows, one of the things that jumped out at me in our research was that 91% of the companies that we surveyed have no strategic functional alignment. And that you would expect some, but we're talking virtually none. And of those 91%, half of them have situations where none of the functional leaders have integrated the strategies whatsoever with each other. And oftentimes the sales leader is the number one culprit in not having a real strategy.
Sales leader is also the number one victim. So if you're a CEO, if you're a CMO, if you're a head of sales, why do you care about this? Because what Mike's talking about is that if you have functional misalignment, it hits you right where it hurts, in the wallet. You can look right at your W-2 and see the impact. You know, you not only make less money, your bonuses suffer, your stock grants are lower or non-existent, your stock options are underwater, and at the end of the day, you can lose your job. And if you look at the statistics for the average tenure of a head of sales, it's 18 months. That's ridiculous. And we got CEOs who would just say, you know what, I kind of go on the plan of cycle my sales leader every 2 years. So the interesting thing is that we're finding over time that people who were immune before, or at least insulated, like the CMO and even the product leader, are starting to be held to higher metrics, and so they're also under pressure. They can also lose their jobs. So this is a big deal.
Definitely. Okay, our first question comes from a viewer of SBI TV. David, the Chief Revenue Officer at a large information technology and services company, asks, we have a new CEO and VP of strategy. There's a lot of blah, blah talk at HQ about strategy. Yeah. But we have all heard this before, and the flurry of activity at the top has no impact on the field. It's just slowing us down, and loose talk about needing changes in strategy paralyzes our people. How do we get everyone refocused on execution? Mike and Kevin, this seems to be something that we hear in our clients all the time. So how would you respond to that?
Mike, I defy you to name one word that in business is as abused, tortured, misunderstood as the word strategy.
How about transformation?
Okay. All right, that's one.
That, all right.
Now, don't get me started on my riff about transformation. All right, let's stick to strategy. Look, we've all endured bad strategy. Whether you're a CEO, marketing leader, sales leader, HR leader, we've all seen the monkey drill, the goat rodeo. I've just torn my hair out, and as you can see, Mike's had even bigger problems with strategy than I have probably. Mike, I've had consultants in my office asking the wrong questions, trying to validate their mind that was already made up and that kind of thing. I've actually thrown some out of my office. If you're a sales leader, especially if you're like I was, if you think strategy is bunk, I don't blame you. But it's really ironic then that what I'm going to sit here to do today is to say it's vital to your company and to your career. Let's first start by settling this ridiculous argument about strategy versus execution. I hear people talk about it all the time. They're indivisible.
Yep.
Right? I think what the key point is that if you don't have a set of coherent, coordinated actions that happen in the near term, not long-term strategy, then you don't have strategy. I don't know what you have, You might have a list of strategic objectives, but you don't have a strategy. So we'll talk a little bit today about really what a corporate sales, marketing, product, et cetera, strategy is. But let's go ahead and present some evidence. What are the things that are the hallmarks of good strategy versus bad strategy? I'll kick you off.
Okay, thanks, Kevin.
The first thing I'll say is good strategy looks trouble right in the eye, right? It actually faces up to the challenge, whereas bad strategy ducks it. It fails to identify the obstacles in the way. And if you don't identify the obstacles, you have no hope of overcoming them. The second thing I'll add is that good strategy focuses amongst all the maelstrom, all the complexity and ambiguity. A talented leader sifts through and grabs one or two or a very small number of pivotal points in a situation and focuses the resource, time, money, people, energy on those pivotal aspects of a situation. If you look at, in contrast, bad strategy, you got, here's my goal, and my strategy is goal, 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 goal. And then I've got objective, 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 and there's no earthly idea of how you're going to achieve any of them, right? You just have this laundry list of objectives.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
It does. I really like this contrast method you brought up, Kevin. It was trying to posit the one side, the good strategy, versus the other side, the bad strategy. And so if I'm a leader out there, say a sales leader, and I'm saying to myself, okay, I have a piece of paper, I have a strategy, I have objectives, is it really doing what Kevin and Mike say? So let me just run down a tick list for you, and you can say to yourself, okay, I'm in the good column or I'm in the bad column, you can decide for yourself. So the first one is, what does a good strategy do? It simplifies how you can achieve your goals. So it doesn't just lay the goal out, it says how to get there in a set of steps that can be followed. What does a bad strategy do? It just sort of restates those goals, as though saying it 3 times makes it easier, and doesn't give you a way to get there. There's no navigation, there's no roadmap. So that's number one. Number 2, a good strategy creates an advantage by coordinating a bunch of resources together, people, time, and money, bringing them all together at a pressure point to achieve the stated goals. That's a good strategy. What does a bad strategy do? It's super vague about all that. It pretends as though there's no budgeting decisions that have to be made, that people aren't pointed one direction or another. And that provides no directionality to the strategy. What's the third example of a good strategy? It cascades down through all the organizational subsidiaries. It's something that's referenced up and referenced down. It's picked up beyond the strategy. The strategy isn't just a bunch of hermetically sealed documents. It's something that permeates the organization. What does a bad strategy look like? It's something that leads these subordinates to figure it out. It stays locked in the executive boardroom and never makes it out beyond that. That's what a bad strategy looks like. And maybe lastly, what is a good strategy? It's a little bit unexpected. There's a little bit of the new in it. There's the tension of the never tried before. It's exploring new paths in a way that builds the company. What does a bad strategy do? It's the same old, same old. You could have actually photocopied it from your competitors, changed the logos, and there's your strategy. So go down your list of your own personal strategies and say, hey, do I have tick marks in the good or do I have tick marks in the bad?
Yep. No, I think those are great points, Mike. I'm reminded of a graphic I saw in a book by Jeffrey Moore, and it was a bunch of arrows pointing all over the place. And he says, "Remember your vector math from high school?" And he says the vector math, that cancels each other out, and that's what you see so much, where things either fail to amplify each other or worse, outright conflict. Yep. So let's talk from the perspective of a corporate strategy for our clients trying to LOA corporate, product, marketing, sales, and talent strategies, and then align with the external market. Let's talk a little bit about what does corporate strategy do. So the corporate strategy defines where you're going to play and where you're not going to play. It defines with whom you're going to compete, including the dreaded no decision and do nothing and do it yourself in-house. It also says how you're going to defeat those opponents. And it gets discreet about it, right? It's not vague, as you said. Ultimately, at the end of the day, and CEOs will appreciate this, it's how you allocate people, time, and money. And I think you mentioned that. And then as a practical matter, if you're a sales leader, your marketing leader, bottom line is having a strategy is not a guarantee, right? Strategy is a hypothesis. Strategy is your read of the future. But it gives you a much greater likelihood of making the number.
You know, Kevin, I agree. If I had a knife, I would stab conventional wisdom 3 times on this one. I really would. And the sales leader, I'm sometimes embarrassed to say, leads the charge in the strategy is all fluff and nonsense. I wish they didn't. And one of the things, whenever we're sitting down with the sales leaders and sometimes the marketing leaders to discuss strategy, is we say, look, please understand, strategy is about doing the right things. Tactics is about doing things right. And sometimes that is at the level of complexity that the sales leader, marketing leader needs to be able to internalize that, say, okay, I get it. Maybe strategy isn't all fluff and nonsense. And really and truly, those that if you ever run into a leader that is saying, you know what, I'm just not going to deal with strategy, I'm just going to get it all done on my execution, that's not just lazy, that is dangerous.
It is.
And our report that we're going to discuss the meat of, it tells you what the financial impacts are of that laziness, of that inability to understand that both strategy and tactics married together are needed to drive the business forward. And so I'd like you to take a look at the chart that I'm going to show on the screen here, and it shows what happens to those companies that either poorly or well execute strategy and tactics. And you see a 4-box grid there, and you see what happens when you do tactics efficiently or strategy efficiently. You want to be in the upper right-hand grid of that box where your company is thriving. It is actually executing on the strategy, it's articulated it, and it has developed the tactics to implement that strategy and is executing those tactics. And that's where a company is going to be, up and to the right.
Yeah, you see so many things where there's such an over-rotation on doing things right. You know, the efficient execution of tactics. Mm-hmm. And so you get tactics masquerading as strategy.
Yep.
And you just hit a wall that way. You know, it's interesting, you mentioned people's resistance to strategy, and the thing that is so crazy is that if I'm a sales leader, I've volunteered to play crack the whip, and I'm at the end, right? And so, you know, who's next on the chopping block first, right? Mm-hmm. I'm the most measurable, I'm the
Yep.
lagging of all lagging indicators. So I have a vested interest in alignment almost more than anybody else,
Yep.
which makes it interesting that often sales leaders don't have a strategy at all, that often other leaders don't have a strategy, even CEOs, half the time they either have a strategy that is fuzzy or non-existent. It's just crazy. So, you know, hopefully we can help people figure out not only that they ought to have strategies, that they ought to be in strategic alignment, but how. And that's you know, what the workbook is there. You know, we got a research report that's not just academic, it's literally like a cookbook, right, for how you do strategy. Hey, you know, I wanted to bring up something for both of you. We use an agile methodology in our business. And you know, lots of businesses are agile or are committed to agile. And I just wanted to bring up the idea that, and I've heard this said before, where, you know, when you're agile, you're able to, what's the definition of agility? It's the ability to change direction. People say, well, that makes strategy irrelevant. But really what that is just saying it's okay to substitute tactics, in this case, very agile tactics, for strategy. But you can still have chaos. You know, I go back to that Jeff Moore, cancel each other out.
Thanks, Kevin. You know, and I like that, sort of the arrows aligning as an indicator of good strategy when there's no friction, right? There's no headwinds. And one of the things, and this, let me wrap this back into David's original question to summarize. One of the biggest mistakes I see sales leaders in particular, and marketing and product leaders make, is they assume sort of a whiteboard approach. Like they get the grease pencil and they're sitting there with a consultant and say, okay, let's do strategy. And they pretend like their company doesn't exist. And when you take that complete whiteboard approach, you eliminate, you're really taking out of the picture centers of competence you have in your own organization and the people, time, and resources that you have to decide to reallocate. So, and then you run into additional headwinds down the road. So my recommendation is that when you're sitting down and you're deciding what are the right things to do, the strategy, and then after that, how are you going to do those things right? That you start off with the core competencies and capabilities, the resources, the time and talent that you have of your own people, yep. And then you pour that into the actual written document that you produce that is then going to be referenced and permeated throughout the organization. That'll make the difference, David.
All right.
Makes sense to me.
My takeaway is that our audience's business can only thrive first by doing the right things and then by doing things right. Mm-hmm. When the two intersect, you get a brilliant plan that's executed brilliantly.
Right.
If you're a practical executive inspired to do a good strategy, grab 3 resources that will really help you. The first is Good Strategy, Bad Strategy, The Difference and Why It Matters by Richard Rummelt, Playing to Win by A.G. Lafley and Roger Martin, and then SBI's 2016 research report on strategic alignment featuring the 6-step methodology for linking and aligning market research, corporate product, marketing, sales, and talent strategies.
Hold that bad boy up, Mike.
It's a strategy roadmap for an executive or executive team.
You got to do the Carol Merrill.
Whether you've always practiced good strategy or just now are willing to believe it's possible, we've covered issues around strategic alignment in the Q3 edition of our SBI magazine, How to Slay Your Number in 2016. Check out specifically the feature article, which uncovers what elite business leaders do differently. Let's take a short break and let everyone know how to get a copy. When we get back, we'll talk to product, sales, marketing, and talent leaders about your specific strategy and debate whether strategic alignment with your peers is worth the trouble. We'll be right back.
Making your number is hard. Your problems are complex. Complex problems need complex solutions. Introducing the SBI magazine. Read in-depth stories written by award-winning journalists about how your peers have overcome their problems to make the numbers. When you need more than a tweet, social post, or blog article, turn to the SBI magazine. Go to salesbenchmarkindex.com to subscribe.
Welcome back. My name is Christina Dickmeyer, and I'm here with my co-hosts, Mike Drapeau and Kevin Avery, for today's show, Strategy is Not a Four-Letter Word. All right, you're ready to beat your competition by designing a coherent strategy. But let's hear from Robert, the SVP of Sales at an electronic manufacturing company, who posed this question to us. Last year, you convinced me that I needed to create a real sales strategy, and that sequence mattered. It feels like as long as my strategy hangs together and I get what I need to execute it, I will be successful. But now you say I need to be aligned with my peers, some of whom may not even have their own strategies. If I have to slow down and try to get my CEO and peers all in the same boat, I'll miss my number. It just feels like this level of strategic alignment is near impossible and maybe not really worth the effort. Mike and Kevin, what do you think?
All right. Here goes the hand grenade into the pool. At SBI, as you guys know, I'm known as the provocateur because I will poke the bear. And so I'm going to poke Robert a little bit. You got two things right? You got a strategy and you got sequencing. Sequencing is hugely important. And I get it that you're like, look, herding cats, I don't have time. Yep. But it's like I don't have time to be organized. You don't have time not to be organized, right? You don't have time not to mobilize your peers and the CEO. And we'll talk a little bit about through the show about how you do that. But, let me also be honest, for a change. Yeah. Look. I don't know how to say this nicely, but sales is a giant herd of mediocrity. And it's not that there's not greatness out there, but there's just a lot of stuff that's not that great. If you look at our research in that workbook, half of the companies aren't even out of the strategy blocks. They either don't have a strategy, they have a fuzzy one, there is a strategy, but the functional leaders can't articulate it. It's a sad state. Only 15% of companies actually have what we would consider full internal alignment. And a much smaller portion, only 9%, not only have that internal alignment, but have a real and a rich alignment with their external market.
All right, Kevin, so now it's time for me to come out of my shell, right? So here I come.
I've been waiting.
Yeah, I know. I've been so mellow. So this issue of siloed strategies, this is a big deal. And it's one that most leaders don't tumble to because they get so heads down in their own strategy world, they don't pick it up and realize that by optimizing themselves within their little four walls, they're doing damage to themselves and really to the overall company. So if you go to the SBI's revenue growth maturity model, which we discuss in our report, How to Make Your Number in 2016, you'll see that we articulate very well what an organization looks like as it moves from level 1 all the way through up to level 5. The impact from moving from level 4, in level 4, each leader has their own strategy, but they're not aligned with each other at that point. The impact from moving from level 4 to level 5. And in level 5, all those strategies are reconciled, they're aligned, they're coordinated, they're interconnected, they're interdependent. At that point in time, the value is immense. So one aspect of that immensity, that impact, is the customer lifetime value. the customer lifetime value going from level 4 to level 5 doubles. That's just amazing.
Incredible.
Yep.
So here's the flip side, though. Again, I'm going to bring out my honest self again.
Yep.
It is possible that good enough is good enough. Look, there are some industries, there are some companies who are in something that's quiescent, that there's a low disruption factor, that your buyers are not those advanced buyers. They're still in the Stone Age. They're partying like it's 1999. And in that case, you might be able to put off the hard work of achieving strategic alignment. And if you're a sales leader, you probably know them. Just don't kid yourself. But if you're a company that's in a dynamic market, heavily competitive, where you need to differentiate, you need a plan. And that plan needs to be a plan for strategic alignment. You need to align with your peers, align with the CEO's corporate strategy, and make sure that you're aligned with the external market. The fact is, just push harder, which is so common, right?
Yep.
Just do what we did last year, raise the goal,
faster,
and we'll just somehow do more. You're sooner or later hitting the wall.
Kevin, when I sit down with the leaders like that, the ones kind of you described, the good enough leaders, I start off, and this is hard for me, I'm sympathetic, right? And I review with them how it was a long, hard slog to go from level 1 to 2 and arrive at level 4, and there's a feeling of satisfaction with that. And then there'll be a pause in the conversation. Then I have to punch them in the face because...
Is that your sympathetic side coming out?
Then I change. Okay. The simple answer is you have to get to level 5 because that's where the big lift comes from. You're counting your future options 3 and 4 and 5 years from now. You're counting the valuation of the company as though you're going to continue to get there with what you've done before. And what's happened is you will retard, you won't grow. So getting to level 5 is a way of not dropping back to level 3. And that's, I have to sort of wrench them out of that complacency.
All right, but let me ask you a question about that because, all right, let's say that I'm level 2.
Okay.
All right, and for people who haven't yet consumed the work, level 2 is you have a corporate strategy and you have functional strategies, but they're not implemented.
Right.
Okay? You have a big mountain to climb to level 5. Full strategic alignment, all strategies implemented, alignment with the external market, right? I mean, it's big. And at that point, how do you go from 2 to 5? Probably in 1 year, you ain't making it. But I think that there is a huge gain to get yourself on the path. Because even if it takes you 2 or 3 years, if you're going up and to the right, your customer acquisition costs fall.
Yep.
Your customer lifetime value, because you're retaining and not churning customers, grows.
Yep.
So don't judge yourself by the result. Get on the path and make that progress and go as far as you can in dealing with practical reality and limitations.
Agree, Kevin. And one thing I like when people are sort of challenging our findings or just challenging the concept altogether about this move from level up to level 5. If you look outside, Harvard Business Review has done some tremendous work of late studying what happens when organizations achieve this integrated functional alignment. And the results are powerful. They've studied distribution, manufacturing, supply chain. In fact, they've studied just about everything but sales. So our contribution to the research, typical. Our contribution to research is completely compatible with what they found, which is when those synergies occur, the growth is explosive. And that's just sort of the cost-centric. We're talking about revenue growth, getting the functions, product, marketing, and sales aligned that contribute to growth. So when those three occur, it is really a volcanic eruption of growth and a real ability to jump in the marketplace. So we would say that the findings we have and our How to Make the Number 2016 are fully consistent with and support that which Harvard has found in these other, the non-growth areas of the business.
It's really interesting because it really reminds me of an article that I read recently, and I can't remember where it's from. Of course, that would be a lot better if I could cite it, right?
Yeah, it would.
But the bottom line was the notion was that corporations have difficulty realigning resources. Either they don't know how to do it, or often it's a question of I don't want to inconvenience or discomfort anybody.
Yep.
And so the interesting thing about a level 5 level of alignment is that we're all in the same boat together.
Yep.
We have collective strategies. We know how they input to each other and output to each other. It becomes apparent how we're going to allocate people, time, and money. And if I'm the sales leader, and I understand that I'm in something where our strategy is price. That's the how we win, because we are reducing our cost infrastructure below everybody else. I understand that I'm not going to get as big a share of the pie, but everybody else also understands that we need a more limited set of skills and high wire performance from my sales force. So again, we're in alignment. I think it's probably easier then as your market changes to be able to say, you know what, we've got to go from a strategy where heretofore it's been product, right? Where all of a sudden we've made some changes in whatever, the market's shifting, there's commoditization happening, but we actually have done some really smart things, take cost out of the business, and now we're going to focus on sort of price as a central strategy.
Thanks, Mike and Kevin, for sharing with us your opinions on strategic alignment and why it's necessary to making your number. One thing we can clearly agree on is that none of the functional groups can be completely successful without support from the others. Bottom line, each functional area can move the ball forward without strategic alignment, but only so far. There's another resource that our audience might enjoy, SBI TV. This video show features engaging interviews and lively debates with the industry's top sales and marketing leaders. It gives in-depth insight into topics like strategic alignment and how your peers are doing it. For example, we recently featured the president of Global Sales, Marketing, and Client Solutions of Broadridge Financial Solutions in our episode, How This Leader Uses Strategic Alignment to Make His billion-dollar sales number. Let's take a short break and direct everyone to subscribe to SBI TV. When we come back, we'll talk to you about how you can take what might seem like a monumental task, strategic alignment, and really get about doing it. We'll be right back.
You are watching SBI TV. This is a monthly web TV show featuring guests just like you, executives trying to grow their revenues. Each month, you can peek behind the scenes and watch your peers discuss their strategies for how they make their numbers. You are not going to want to miss this.
My name is Christina Dickmeyer, and I'm here with my co-hosts Mike Drapeau and Kevin Avery for today's show, Strategy is Not a Four-Letter Word. Before the break, Mike and Kevin shared with us what it means to have a strategy and why the only way a company can grow is through functional strategic alignment. We're going to build on this even more and start talking about the how. How can our audience possibly eat this elephant, if you will? Actually, creating a strategy can be a real burden, especially for a leader who has not really done one. And to add on top of that, they need to be aligned with the other functions, and the effort can be daunting. How would you two respond to this challenge? How should the functional leaders develop their aligned strategies?
Well, let's talk about where a good strategy starts.
Okay.
Diagnosis. So pick up our workbook. Hold that up, Mike. You got to be Carol Merrill. You got to get better at this. So use that workbook. Then check out your market research. Do you have good market research? The book will help you determine that, right? Assess that. Understand where your gaps are. Go through the corporate strategy. Go through the functional strategies. Do you have a corporate strategy? Use that to assess the quality of it. Do your peers have functional strategies so you can align with them?
Mm-hmm. This issue really speaks to me, Kevin, as someone who's been given the golden pencil and said, go forth and write the strategy. And you then do that, you walk into your office, you shut the door, and Lord, what am I going to do? I'm staring at a blank piece of paper. I've never done this before. The CEO is waiting, and I've got to then create it for the entire sales function, or the entire marketing function. And then you work like the Dickens for 3 straight months. You produce a 75-page document, and then when you're finished, you say, what was that all about? I mean, did it do anything? And then you roll into the new year, and then you blow the dust off it because you never blow the dust off it because it didn't become operationalized. So for me, and even sometimes the worst I've seen is when the strategy and the tactics, they all blend together. It's like a mishmash. And then I feel uncomfortable. How can I roll that out to the street? How can I give that to my people when I don't even really understand it? So this problem is near to my heart.
Yeah. So how do you get going? The first thing is write your own functional strategy, and you talked about that. And then let's talk about how we can take that and actually amplify it by connecting to others. But if you haven't written a strategy before, again, you're staring at a blank screen of Microsoft Word or what have you. You get a mentor. Find a mentor who's got chops in strategy. If you don't have that, then use external resources. We help a lot of clients and non-clients, answering questions, helping them frame things, and that kind of thing. And that Make the Numbers 2016 workbook can be invaluable. And then also give some thinking to about what do you need for your strategy from the other functions, because you're going to then go to them and say, what do you need for yours?
Okay, thanks. And because I love laundry lists, I'm a linear thinker. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to provide a set of recommendations that if I could give it to myself about 10 years ago when I first started writing strategies for sales and marketing departments, I wish I would have. So I'll give it to the audience. Number one, first key recommendation is simplicity beats complexity. Okay.
Fact.
And Jane Gazdaska, who is the VP of Corporate Marketing for Phillips 66, made this exact same point in a podcast interview she did in May of 2015. And she goes into deep detail as to how when she wrote her strategy, she had to simplify. That doesn't mean simplistic. It just means simplify. The second point is use a framework. And there's several different frameworks out there, but the idea is you want to touch all the aspects. You want to touch process, you want to touch people, you want to touch resources, you want to touch policy, structure, all these, even in particular metrics. As long as you have those sort of elements covered, then you know that the words will flow. They'll make sense. Third item is identify the inputs. So make sure that you tell your other fellow peer functional leaders, and also even the CEO, hey, this is what I need from you. I need your strategy to produce this so I can consume it and then react to it in my strategy. If you don't tell them what you need, how can they make it part of their strategy?
Right.
The fourth piece is the corporate strategy. Make sure that while you're writing your strategy, you've got the corporate strategy right there on the table. You're flipping through it, and what you're doing references it, aligns to it, reflects it, implements it. So as long as, at number one, you want to line up, and then you want to line across. The fifth one is culture. Many leaders really underestimate the incredible importance of defining a culture and then promulgating their culture into their strategy. Show how your corporate culture is actually being implemented in the context of the strategy you're doing, because that is one of the ways that defines you and it makes you unique. Next is make sure that you've identified the risks and the obstacles, the big ones, not the small ones, but the big risks and obstacles, and then how, in at least the basic enough way, you're going to overcome them.
Face the challenge.
That makes sure that you know what your headwinds. If you're not honest about the headwinds you're running into, you're just going to go slower and slower and not know why.
Yep.
Two more. Show what's net new. So we talked earlier about the whole sort of whiteboard approach. Well, you're not doing a strategy for whiteboard. Your company exists. It has people. It has product. It has customers. So in your strategy, show the net new things you're doing. So people, when they're reading the strategy, they say, oh, wow, okay, that's a new thing. Instead of just coloring 50 pages in black type, maybe show them, highlight the area. This is box it out. This is something new we're going to be doing. And lastly, include some sort of a plan of action, a quarterly, this is how we're going to get there, maybe a roadmap. Not deep in the weeds, but if I'm standing back and saying, okay, here's a strategy, here's how we're going to make the strategy happen in our organization, is it all going to happen in January the 1st? And probably not. Right. So show how it's going to phase out into the organization.
That makes tons of sense to me. The other thing that I'd like to highlight is, in terms of the how, is what you need to do is align and collaborate. And we're often in our businesses, if I'm a sales leader and I've been a sales leader, run marketing, business development, things like that, we're like toddlers in the playpen. We're playing near each other, as opposed to actually, parallel play. And so we actually need to now have real play. And so how do you do that? It can be uncomfortable because if people don't have strategies, you don't know, whatever. You don't want to go, hey, stupid. You got to write a strategy.
Yep.
So how do you get about mobilizing to align? Number one is, take your strategy, mind your market research, and then start with your CEO. And you don't say, hey, dummy, you're failing as a CEO. You just say, if you don't know he has a strategy or you're not sure what it is, just walk in and say, look, here's my strategy. I want you to go through it, and I want you to make sure that the things that I'm going to do are in alignment with your corporate strategy.
Right.
The corporate strategy, if it's not clear, will come out that point. You have a dialogue and you don't threaten somebody. You can do the same thing with your peers. If you make it all about the other guy, it's just like sales, right? It's go to somebody and say, hey, look, here's the plan I'm working on. I want to make sure that nothing I'm going to do here is going to screw up you meeting your goals. And again, you start then to have an intersection. So it's all about mobilize and collaborate. Use our strategy framework you talked about, the strategic alignment. It's a workbook. And so if you don't like that, find one you do like, but just do it. If you look at the different functions, start with your cousins, right? Sales and marketing are natural cousins. It's historically been like Hatfield and McCoy, so let's not do that. Same with product and marketing. You have certain affinities, so start there. It's easier probably right there. And don't forget your poor HR leader. Mm-hmm. HR leader wants to help you deliver the talent that you need and help develop it and that kind of thing, but the HR leader can't do it to you. They can only do it with you and for you. And they can only do that if they understand your strategy.
So just really quickly, Kevin, it seems like this is a tall order, what we've put together, but it really isn't. And I think your just do it analogy is the right one. Once you move forward within these guidelines we've given you and you vet your strategy up and with your functional peers in a relatively short period of time, you're going to find yourself creating something that's truly dynamic and actionable. And it will move the organization, which indeed is the goal of what you're doing. People, time, and resources, reallocating them. And that's what it will do.
Small victories.
All right. Well, Mike and Kevin, thanks so much for sharing your opinions today. All the evidence points to the fact that companies can no longer afford to launch individual initiatives hoping that they will somehow align themselves. We're going to take one final break, and when we come back today, we'll wrap up today's episode. If you like listening to this show, you'll want access to more peer-driven best practices. Here's how to subscribe to the SBI podcast. We'll be right back.
Do you have too many things to do and not enough time to do them? Is finding time to learn best practices almost impossible? The SBI podcast is your solution. Turn time spent exercising, commuting, and traveling into productive learning time with a subscription to the SBI podcast. SBI podcast listeners get unique insight into real-world sales and marketing issues through interviews with your industry peers every week. Find us on iTunes by searching for Sales Benchmark Index Podcast and subscribe today.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope you've been enjoying today's show, Strategy is Not a Four-Letter Word. Today, we made the case that good strategy is practical, vital, and something a leadership team can collaborate on. We cited evidence for how increasingly rare it is that functional leaders can succeed without support from the other functions. We discussed why strategic alignment presents the best and only way to systematize profitable revenue growth. If you want to make sure you have strategic alignment in your organization, get a copy of this year's research report called How to Make Your Number in 2016 by going to www.salesbenchmarkindex.com/2016-report. If you want to take it a step further, you can have one of our experts lead you through a workshop that will go into detail on how to do this. Go to www.salesbenchmarkindex.com/2016-workshop and request a workshop today. And finally, thank you, our audience, for tuning in. For myself, Kevin, and Mike, we wish you much success as you try and make your number.
This has been the SBI Podcast. For more information on SBI services, case studies, the SBI team and how we work, or to subscribe to our other offerings, please visit us at salesbenchmarkindex.com.